Good morning, everyone. And we start the next part of the lecture. In the last class, I had discussed what are the fundamental conceptions in the Marxist theory of state. And I actually taught all of you. So for those who have not attended and those who are watching me live right now, what I taught was that how Marxist theory of state is in direct opposition or response to the liberal theory of state, right? That is how we actually started this entire topic. And we went through what Marx has to offer on understanding of state. Not only that, we also went through what are the different ideas of state that pop up in the Marxist discourse, right? So for example, if we go for a quick revision, we have seen that for Marxism, it is all about the class state, isn't it? And here you find the idea of Marx regarding the executive of the modern state, right? And it's not the executive of the modern state. He also has commented, just before that paragraph, he has commented about the sway over the representative institutions by the bourgeois classes. That's one of the idea. And we find this idea in the Communist Manifesto. You can say that Communist Manifesto is perhaps one of the most revolutionary documents ever written across human history as far as the ideological spectrum of our collective society is concerned and history or past is concerned. Similarly, in the Marx only, we also find one more idea of the state, which is about the relative autonomy of the state. Now, in this, the relative autonomy framework, I said that you can refer to the prime text, which is known as the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, right? Or what is considered as the Bonapartism. And in this text, Marx is actually reflecting that when there is no such domination by a single class in the mode of production, or when there is some kind of balance between different classes in the mode of production, the state gets a relative autonomy. But this autonomy is relative, right? It means that this is not absolute autonomy, and this relative autonomy grants the state some kind of space to impose its will upon the society. But always remember, it is not here to suggest that state becomes relatively autonomous from the base. It's not like that. Since there is no dominance of a single class in the base, that is why the state is relatively autonomous. So even this relative autonomous idea of the state is a reflection of the nature of base itself. So base is still determining the superstructure, right? And when we think from this perspective, there is an idea of overdeterminism. So when the state is imposing its will on the society, it is trying to overdetermine. And if you read scholars like Surupto Kaviraj, so for example, when you pursue your master's degree, there you will read a lot about Althusser, Louis Althusser. You will read something more about Surupto Kaviraj. So if Althusser is coming from the idea of overdeterminism, which he has taken from Sigmund Freud, Surupto Kaviraj is coming from the idea of underdeterminism. So these are the debates in which we cannot enter, because this is beyond the BA Honors Political Science level. For your UPSC is very simple actually. It's not beyond BA Honors Political Science. But apart from this, there are two more ideas which emerge. One is what is considered as the idea of a socialist state in the Marxist discourse. And this socialist state is nothing but what is considered as dictatorship by proletariat. All right, so dictatorship of proletariat. And I also mentioned why this dictatorship is necessary. Number one, it is about ensuring that the benefits of revolution reach every single section of society. And the second major idea is to make sure how to stop the counter-revolution by the bourgeois classes. And then there is a fourth idea of state, which is considered as the idea of withering away of the state. Interesting part is that in the Marxist discourse, there is not much clarity on what is the meaning of withering away of the state. Majorly what we are finding is that perhaps the state will become not that effective, or in other words, the rationale of having a state will no more be self-evident or perhaps important. And that is why how the state will wither away, or what will happen to it, this remains an open question. And many of the scholars have actually worked on the framework of withering away of the state. Like, what is the meaning of the withering away of the state? But precisely these are the four different ideas regarding the state which develops in the Marxist theory. Is this clear? Today, I want to discuss a bit about Althusser. I want to discuss a bit about Ralph Miliband, Nicos Poulantzas, and also to some extent, I will give you a minor insight, because not too much into that, as it is not necessary from the UPSC perspective, about what Bob Jessop has to offer, right? And of course, Gramsci in between, post Althusser. Now, when we start with the idea of Gramsci, let's bring in Gramsci. What Gramsci is trying to offer us. See, if you look at the way Marx is explaining that state is a class state, it means what? That there is some element of, or let's say some idea of repression involved. Can we say like that? That perhaps Marx is providing with an idea that there is some element of repressive nature of the state here. This is how it is coming out. You can use one more word, that perhaps there is some element of coercion involved, isn't it? This is how we think about it. Gramsci was trying to understand how the state works for the interest of the ruling classes, right? And then Gramsci said that, listen, don't just rely on the repressive apparatus. Don't just rely on the coercive apparatus. Try to understand it from the perspective of hegemony. And hegemony is a different topic. In power, we have to study hegemony. But let's try to understand it, what Gramsci is actually offering us. See how it is going on. Hegemony, and the second element is coercion, right? So let's bring in coercion as well. When you think from the perspective of coercion, we are looking at the idea of repression. So if there is any protest going on against the dominant classes, the state is going to repress that protest. That is how the Marxists are actually trying to understand this topic. You may move a bit further, and Gramsci says, no, this is not the only thing that is happening here. We have to understand civil society as well. Now, just imagine that if you have to understand it from the perspective of base and superstructure, where will you keep civil society? Sure, superstructure, not base, right? But is civil society just a reflection of what is happening in the base? I mean, if it is in superstructure, then definitely it's about reflection of the base. Base is going to determine what is happening in the superstructure. So if you think like this, civil society becomes what? A kind of effect. The cause is in the base. Gramsci was not able to accept this. Have you heard anything about Gramsci? Have you read about him? See, Gramsci was imprisoned. Mussolini, right? Fascism. And interestingly, the Gramsci's work are known as prison notebooks. So you can understand that he was writing in the diary, prison time. And what is beautiful in Gramsci's writing is that he's actually applying the methods, or he's applying the terminologies which are used in war. So he's saying people, he's saying nation, right? And he's saying battle. Okay? He's not saying class as such. Why? Because he has to tackle the Mussolini effect. Then Mussolini perhaps might be reading his notebooks, or someone on behalf of Mussolini must be surveilling him, what Gramsci is writing. So Gramsci said, why this state, the so-called capitalist state, is able to dominate, or it is able to pursue or forward the will of the ruling classes. And he said that apart from the repression, there is one more thing which is happening in the civil society domain, where the state is or it is trying to ensure that persistence of the ruling by securing hegemony and consent of the people. So suppose think like this. Have you ever observed your YouTube these days? Suppose you go back in the family once and you say, I want to be Bhagat Singh. What will be the response of the family? Will they be happy? I want to be Bhagat Singh. Why will they not be happy? What's wrong in being Bhagat Singh? I mean, they all celebrate, na? They must be sharing the WhatsApp status. Shahid Divas, martyr of freedom, isn't it? Bhagat Singh was the real martyr, not Gandhi. Many of your parents or might be your siblings, they must be sharing this status. But suppose you just say, okay, I want to be like Bhagat Singh. What is going to be the response of the family? Complete denial? Pakka? Koi nahi support karega. Okay. Now suppose you say, I want to rise like Mr. Ratan Tata. What will be the response of the family? ये कुछ करेगा जीवन में, है ना? इसने अच्छा गोल सोचा है. Like, think like this. I know that there is a Professor Avijit Pathak in JNU. He's a sociology teacher. And I remember that he had written a wonderful article in which he mentioned that perhaps Ambani resides in our mind. We all want to be like Ambanis. This is the model that we have, right? Suppose the peasants are sitting nearby Delhi border. And then what is the news debate all about? Oh, lot of traffic jam. Oh, why these people don't want to work? Oh, why you want to have only revedi in your life? Why can't you work hard? Listen, suppose you look at the entire industry, you will find the motivation industry working in a different manner. You all are 20, 21, 22-year-old at maximum, right? And if I have to check your YouTube now, I will find similar content. Yes, it is going to happen. I can guarantee it. I'm telling you, I can guarantee it. If I start scrolling now, in the end, your entire discourse will be around the same thing. Like, I want to ask all of you about, have you ever heard this person's name, Amitabh Bachchan? Tell me his 5 legendary movies when he became a star. Not the movies of today, like not the 102 Not Out or Bagban, not like that. But when he was a young star. Zanjeer, yes, Angry Young Man. Coolie is later. Anand, no. Rajesh Khanna, I would say. Not. Abhiman is a good movie, yes. Abhiman and Zanjeer, yeah. Diwar, है ना? तुम्हारे पास क्या है? Like, if you think about Diwar, like Diwar is a wonderful example here. What was the profession of Amitabh Bachchan's father in the movie Diwar? Do you even remember that movie? You must have not remembered that, na? In that movie, Amitabh Bachchan's father is the leader of a workers' union in a factory. And he is protesting against the capitalist class, the particular factory owners. Then they just lure him and they try to defame his ideas. And later on, the workers abandon him. And that is why it is written on Amitabh Bachchan's left arm, ki mera baap chor hai. That's the imprinted, right? And then later on, Amitabh Bachchan realizes that, man, if you are following the active politics of unionism, it's not gonna work. Even the workers are just going to kill you. That is why they have written this, na? So Rishi Kapoor goes there and he says, ki, bhai tum sign karte ho ya nahi, right? And then the legendary dialogue comes, ki pehle uske sign kara ke lao jisne ye likha, pehle uske sign kara ke lao jisne wo kiya, right? That's the drama in the movie. But in that movie, Amitabh Bachchan, then when he is left, he is out there, his father is no more, his father has become a vagabond. Later on, we find that he is dead. Amitabh Bachchan started boot polishing, and then there is a guy named Dabur, in that movie. Dabur is there going for the horse riding things, right? And he always makes sure that he gets the boot polished when he has taken care of the entertainment or infotainment things. Then he just says, okay, give him some money. And the person right next to Dabur throws a coin towards this young Amitabh Bachchan. And what the boy says, कि हाथ में पैसा दो, मैं फेंके हुए पैसे नहीं उठाता, है ना? Later on, the same Dabur and Amitabh Bachchan meet, and Dabur says, okay, you have to do something for me. He says, fine, and he just throws the money again, and then Amitabh Bachchan repeats everything, कि Dabur साहब आपको याद होगा, हैं? आप घुड़सवारी देखने जाया करते थे, और आप बूट पॉलिश कराते थे, ठीक है? And then he says, हाँ हाँ याद है, बोलो, और आप हमेशा बूट पॉलिश कराते थे, हाँ हाँ मुझे याद है, मैं आज भी फेंके हुए पैसे नहीं उठाता, है ना? And then Dabur is like, oh, I'm sorry. And then he just hits him. Later on, Amitabh Bachchan is purchasing a big building, big tower there. And then the person says, बुरा मत मानिएगा विजय साहब, आपको धंधा करने नहीं आता. And then Amitabh Bachchan replies कि अगर आप मुझसे इसकी दुगनी कीमत मांगते तो भी मैं दे देता. And then the person is like, क्यों भाई, ऐसा क्यों है? And then he says, मेरी माँ ने यहाँ उठाई थी. So a person whose life was destined to become miserable, suddenly that young lad, with his frustration and the feeling of vengeance, is able to rule over the Mumbai city. That's the dream of the bourgeois. That's the American dream, right? And in that time period, if you talk to your father, na, every other individual wanted to be like Amitabh Bachchan. है ना, सब कोई अपने आप को आपको अमिताभ बच्चन ही समझते थे. Like if you go back and ask your father, ये पापा, what do you think about Amitabh Bachchan? Then he will like, oh, दीवार मैंने 5 बार देखी थी जाके, है ना. उसके बाद वही सेम बेल बॉटम पैंट्स और एकदम अमिताभ बच्चन की तरह बाल रखने हैं, हिपी स्टाइल, लंबे लंबा. And everybody is like, okay, this is the person you have to be, right? Now just imagine this in a popular culture. In the end, tell me, have you ever observed in that movie that Amitabh Bachchan is actually working very hard? You have seen that, the coolie, right? And then suddenly, by working hard, he is able to rule over the city. That's the dream of the bourgeois, na? If you work hard, you get everything. Later on, there is a period in the Bollywood cinema of 1980s and 90s when there was a decline. And then a new hero emerges, na? Who is now one of the biggest heartthrobs of Indian culture, Shah Rukh Khan, as you all know, right? And his legendary movie is perhaps Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, hai na? There was a premiere going on and he said, this is going to be my Diwar. But tell me, in Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, what is the profession of Shah Rukh Khan? He's a child of a businessman, na? But what's his profession? Has there any single scene in that movie that he is working somewhere in an office or anywhere? You must have watched that movie. He falls in love, hai na? He has fallen in love with Kajol. He comes to India. He is able to have a proper battle with Amrish Puri, Ja Simran Ji Le Apni Zindagi kind of figure. But in that entire movie, he is also able to take the queen, right? वो heroine को लेके जा भी रहा है. But there is nothing about his work. There is nothing about his profession. Which means what? That from Amitabh Bachchan to Shah Rukh Khan, in the Indian masses thinking, initially the idea of hard work is present. And by the time Shah Rukh Khan becomes the star, the bourgeois idea is all pervasive. They are not even bothering to share, okay, what is your struggle? And that is why you will find that recently you have observed that at the OTT platforms, they are showing series like Aspirant. They are showing series like this, where your daily life struggles are emerging. But even in that particular series, they are actually highlighting the people who become successful. In the end, there is not a single landmark cinema that is questioning the so-called capitalist order. Is this statement correct or wrong? There is not a single landmark cinema that is questioning the capitalist order. They are all moving or hovering around the consensus based on capitalism. But suppose you go and watch a movie like Aghat. I think you must have not even heard the name of this movie. I want all of you to watch it. Aghat. It's by Govind Nehlani. Suppose you watch the movie like Party. There's a movie called Party. Okay, Party and Aghat. You watch these movies and you will be surprised to note that in Diwar there is a worker politics shown. In Aghat also there is a worker politics shown. But there is a 10-year difference. And in Aghat you have characters Om Puri, Nasiruddin Shah, hai na? Pankaj Kapoor. These are the characters there. Not even Nasiruddin, but Om Puri and Pankaj Kapoor. In Party, you will find Amrish Puri. You will find Om Puri. You will find Nasiruddin Shah. All of them coming together and portraying a different kind of political movies. It's an intense movie, which means that Gramsci is perhaps right. That in the civil society, there is always a battle going on. And that battle is not like battle on the border front. That battle is the battle of ideas. And through multiple sectors, through cinema, through poetry, through your OTT platforms, through your culture, through your motivation channels, through your discourse, we are able to sustain the dominance of the ruling classes. So what Gramsci said, that instead of looking at state as a repressive force, try to understand state as a mixture of hegemony and coercion. So if the civil society is providing consent leading to hegemony, the political society is about applying coercion, and the state is actually working on both the fronts. And a similar argument was taken over by another person whose name is Louis Althusser. And as far as your contemporary understanding is concerned, understanding Louis Althusser is going to be a bit difficult. The reason being, his writings are very complicated, all right? But what I have in my mind is that I can actually provide you some ideas regarding Althusser. Now, the interesting part about Althusser is that Althusser is giving a huge emphasis that there are multiple spheres of our social existence. So, for example, there is a sphere of culture. All right, there is a sphere of culture. There is a sphere of religion, right? There is a sphere of economy. You can say that there is a sphere of politics as well. You can also bring in that there is a sphere of education. So what Althusser is trying to tell us is that there are multiple spheres, and at one particular time period, or let's say one epoch of history, one sphere is the dominant sphere. All right, so let's have this, that in a particular time, in an epoch, one sphere is going to dominate. So to use a suitable example, if we look at the medieval time period, religion was the dominant sphere. Can we say like that? Isn't it? If you look at the old time period, again the religion was the dominant one, right? But Althusser says in the last run, so for example, if we look at it from the linear way of history, in the longer run, in the larger idea, economy is going to be the most dominant one, sphere of human existence. And in the end, kya dominate karega? Economy. So definitely there are multiple ways to understand it. There are multiple spheres at different point in history. Some sphere is dominant than the other spheres, but in the longer run, the economy is going to be the most determining factor, right? And that is why he says that we have to understand it from the perspective of, or let's say the matrix of social formation. Now, social formation as a concept is reflected differently in history, and in political science we look at it differently. Now, social formation means what? That there are different ideas, and ideological sphere is there, religious sphere is there, economic sphere is there, and social sphere is there. So in a particular social formation there could be different spheres, but in the longer run economy is going to determine. This is how Althusser actually begins his exercise in the larger structure of Marxism. Is this clear? Any doubt? दिक्कत तो नहीं हुआ कुछ भी दिमाग में घुसाने में? Very good. Then, when we move further, he says that perhaps we need to understand a bit more about how the state uses its authority to pursue the interest of a class. If the economy is the dominant one, let's see how the state uses the authority. And following Gramsci, he also reflects on multiple apparatus that are present with the state. So for example, Althusser will say that let's look at the apparatus of the state. है ना? कौन सा इसके पास apparatus मौजूद है? And Althusser says that you can divide this into two specific apparatuses. One is, which Althusser quotes as repressive state apparatus. If you want to bring in Weber here, we are actually talking about the monopoly of means of violence. And how the Marxists are going to refer to monopoly of means of violence? Repressive state apparatus. And the second apparatus Althusser talks about is the ideological state apparatus. Now, as far as the repressive state apparatus is concerned, think about forces of state like police, army, I will also say bureaucracy. Think about judiciary. Even judiciary has an element of repression in it, right? And when you think about the ideological state apparatus, the most important one in the ideological state apparatus is the education system. So for example, in your, later on when you read a bit more about Marxism, you will definitely read something about this person, Stuart Hall and Bram Gibbon. They have a wonderful book called Formations of Modernity. It's a difficult read, but have you ever observed that your disciplinary courses like BA Honors Political Science, BA Honors History, BSc, these disciplinary courses, when was the first time it actually emerged? like the first degree of BA honors in political science? Any idea? कब पहली बार आया होगा? 18 से जाओ, 18 के आसपास जाओ, 1870s के आसपास आपको दिखने लगता है कि BA ऑनर्स पॉलिटिकल साइंस हो रहा है, प्रॉपर कोर्स आ रहा है. Now just imagine, if you think about Aristotle, Aristotle is writing on space as well. Aristotle is writing on science as well. Aristotle is writing on biology as well, literature as well, and politics as well. But now the idea is no, you have to focus on one specific discipline. We are actually trying to differentiate and create a variegated sphere of academia. Is it not happening? कि history वाला history पढ़ रहा है, science वाला science पढ़ रहा है, blah blah blah. And then suddenly, just imagine, is studying political science easier than physics? How many of you think like that? Is it easier than physics? Chemistry is आसान है? Okay, so how many of you agree that those who are securing, let's say, 60% in 10th class, they must be given arts? And those who are securing 90% or 80%, they must be given science. The way things actually prevail in the education system. How many of you agree on that? You agree? Kyun? Why don't you agree? But just imagine, suppose someone is pursuing physics, BSc physics, and you give him a text of Althusser, Ideological State Apparatus article. Can he understand it? He's gonna bang his head on the wall. Like, ये क्या लिखा हुआ है? What is this determinism, etc. But what is the prevalent idea? That arts is easier and science is difficult. This is how we are actually training it, right? Which means that the disciplines which are carefully concerned with the authority of power, that discipline must be considered as an easier discipline and it must not be shown as an ideal. So people who are very well with recreational vocations like painting, literature, poetry, political science, उन लोगों का दर्जा क्या होता है समाज में? कुछ नहीं करना है तो लॉ कर रहा है, ठीक है? Like I remember I went to my village and a Budhwa person asked me, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing BA Honors Political Science from University of Delhi. He said, what are you studying in that? I started telling him and I was also fool at that point of time. I said, we are studying this. He said, baitho. मैं कहा, हाँ. And suppose an old age guy tells you in village to sit, it means he's going to just kill you. And he said, सुनो, राजनीति के 4 नियम होते हैं. मैंने कहा जी, साम दाम भेद दंड मानते हो? मैंने कहा हाँ. यही पढ़ते हो ना? तो I just said कि yeah, I mean, in a sense yes. He said, जब यही करना था तो दिल्ली कहाँ गए? That was the statement, that was the comment, which means what? That in his mind, people who are pursuing political science are not doing anything at all. Isn't it? Can we say like that? So just think about the education system. This emphasis on STEM, science, technology, engineering, medicine. Only focus on this. इसके बाद जिनके पास कुछ नहीं करना, उनको क्या दे दो? I mean, sorry for this finger. उनको दे दो आप ये ठेंगा, ठीक है? ठेंगा में आप क्या देंगे? Arts, humanities, this much. When you think it from the perspective of state and Marxism, that is what Althusser is trying to tell you. That in the ideological state apparatus, by actually making sure that these educational platforms must be taken forward as an ideal, the state is actually creating more and more consent for the capitalist classes. Think a bit more. Like for example, how many of you are pursuing graduation nowadays? Like, have you heard about this 4-year program? New education policy, right? Now, just for understanding, in the end, always remember, you cannot be a Marxist in UPSC paper. But suppose they ask you a question, you must be aware about what to say. So think about this 4-year undergraduate program, and when you look at the cutoff rates, the cutoff of, let's say, arts courses, is it equal to the cutoff of, let's say, science courses? Or is it less? The cutoff of arts courses. Arts is high now? Or science is high? कि ज़्यादा कट ऑफ किसका ऊपर चला जाएगा? बहुत ज़्यादा. आज के टाइम में चीज़ें बदल भी गई हैं. But suppose someone who has studied science in school, can he take admission in the arts course as well? है ना? But suppose someone who has studied arts in school, can he take admission in the science course? No, है ना? There is a difference there, isn't it? Now just imagine your courses. Your courses, are they structured in the way that you become a revolutionary? Or are they structured in a way that you become part of the liberal democratic state apparatus? Part of the liberal democratic state apparatus. The course is structured properly. कि क्या पढ़ाना है, कितना पढ़ाना है. I remember we were pursuing masters, and in the public administration paper, there it is known as the administrative theory paper. And Professor Bidyut Chakravarti was teaching us, right? He's the biggest name in the public administration. And Professor Bidyut Chakravarti said that we are going to study Mao as an administrator. And we're like, what? He said, yeah, Mao as an administrator. And then there was one more faculty in the department, I will not take the name. He started asking us, what are you studying? And we said, sir, we have studied Mao as an administrator. And he started laughing. He said, Mao was a revolutionary. And you are being taught Mao as an administrator. You can understand in this one statement how the ideological state apparatus actually works. That you need to create consent for the ruling classes. And if people are not able to get tamed by the ideological state apparatus, the state always has the repressive state apparatus to create more and more consent. This was the larger idea which prevailed, and then later on, by the time we reach the stage of 1960s and 70s, in this time period, the Marxist theory of state got a new turn. Always remember, 1960s and 70s is the time period when pluralist theory of state is also emerging to an extent that in the Anglo-American political theory, pluralist theory of state became the dominant model of understanding the state. At the same time, there was also the rise of behavioralism. There was the rise of systems approach, and David Easton's idea of political system was becoming the dominant norm as well. And in this circumstance, there was one scholar whose name is Ralph Miliband. Okay? Ralph Miliband. And Ralph Miliband wrote a wonderful work. The name of the book is The State in Capitalist Society. And I want all of you to focus on this name. Like, what is Miliband going to offer here? Now think about it. Let's have a base and structured debate. If I have to frame a question, try to answer this question. The state, is it going to serve the capitalist class, or is it going to serve capitalism, or this question is a wrong question? The state, is it going to serve the capitalist class, or is it going to serve capitalism, or is it a wrong question in your opinion? You must have never heard about this kind of question. I can guarantee this. But it is a graduation question. State is going to serve the capitalist class. Anybody else? State may. But what's the difference? Or is it a wrong question? Both options are equally applicable for you people. You can answer anything. Am I asking the right question, or am I asking the wrong question? Or suppose when I ask this question, are we not trying to understand something new about the state in the Marxist discourse? But why are you considering capitalist class as a monolithic class? Is it not possible that there is a huge kind of differences within the capitalist class? How many of you are finding the question interesting? This is actually the Marxism of 1969 and 70s, and it is actually emerging from Marx idea only. Remember what Marx said, that the executive of the modern state is nothing but a committee to manage the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie, right? So Marx himself is pointing out that there is a common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie and the state has to manage it. The term that is used by Marx is managing the affair, right? It means what? That Marx is trying to tell you that perhaps there could be fractions in the capitalist class. And this is the point from where Miliband, I am trying to give you a larger idea. This is the point why Miliband said that the name of the book is The State in a Capitalist Society. So he's not coming with this idea. He's actually looking at the relationship between state and capitalism, right? This is the fundamental difference between the old Marxist ideas and the new debate and discourse. And where Miliband is saying is that if you want to understand the role of the state in the capitalist society, we cannot rely on what the pluralists are saying. We cannot rely on what older ideas of Marxism have said. And also we cannot rely on what the political system approach is saying. So by bringing out this work, he is at the one hand thinking about the Marxist framework, and at the same time providing a proper reply to number one, pluralist. And in his work you also find a critique of the system approach. And perhaps what Miliband has to offer is what is considered as the instrumental view of the state. And in addition to the instrumental view of the state, Miliband's idea is also about understanding the role of the state in a capitalist society from interpersonal perspective. And this is how Miliband falls in. So what Miliband is saying? He's saying that on the one hand, we have to reflect on how Marx talked about the relationship between class and state. This is one point. And at the same time, we have to understand that what kind of Western society we have today. And Miliband offers certain inputs. Like Miliband says, that if you look at the contemporary Western society, in the Western society, there is a dominant or ruling class, which means that even though pluralists might argue that there are multiple interests in the society, there is an element of dominance present in the Western society. So there is a presence of a dominant or a ruling class. Second point which he says is that this dominant or ruling class has strong links with the state. So in one stroke, Miliband is trying to differentiate between the ruling class, nature of capitalism, and the power of the state. And he's trying to bring out some kind of differentiation that the ruling or the dominant class has strong links with the state itself. Now, what are the links here? And majorly, what kind of powerful positions? So he's saying that in the state, think about judiciary. In the state, think about bureaucracy. In the state, think about legislature. Which class has links with these institutions of the state? The dominant or the ruling class. And link is perhaps something else. Link is like, think like this. Majority of the bureaucrats today that we have here, let's apply Miliband in our context. Majority of the bureaucrats belong to the middle class or the upper middle class or the rich class or not. Majority of bureaucrats. Think something more. If you look at the Delhi University, and I will name some colleges, and you will tell me whether you will have share of bureaucracy there or not. St. Stephen's, Hindu, LSR, Ramjas, मिलेगा आपको, ठीक है? Move further. Venkateshwar College, you will have this. Now if I have to bring something else as well, JNU. What do you think about JNU and bureaucracy? Maximum number of joint secretaries belong to JNU at this time. Yeah. In the JNU library, we have a wing that is called Dholpur House. Yeah, Honorable External Ministers as well. Finance Minister as well. Okay. So, just think like this. In the JNU, We have the library, it's a multi-story building there, and in the library you have a special wing called Dholpur House. Dholpur House is actually the address of UPSC. So all those students who are studying at Dholpur House, they are UPSC aspirants. So many people from JNU are also able to qualify the civil services. Now think about something more. If I say the dominant caste in the Indian society and bureaucracy, is there a correlation or not? The dominant caste, the so-called Savarn category people, and the bureaucracy. Look at the number of the people who belong to the upper caste, so-called, they have lot of share in bureaucracy. Move something further. Think about your academia or academics, and think about the middle class and the dominant caste. You will find similar resemblance. So what Miliband is saying, that there is this linkage which we have to fathom, we have to understand. And the third thing he said was that there is a disproportionate representation as well. This is another thing which he has mentioned, disproportionate representation in the state institutions of the dominant or ruling class interest. So for example, you might say, sir, definitely you are right that the social background of civil servants, it has some kind of affluence as far as the dominant caste are concerned. Many people from the so-called oppressed caste, they also become part of the bureaucracy. But if you have to figure out the data, you will find more and more people belong to the upper positions, commanding positions, they belong to the dominant category. Okay? Those people have the commanding position in the university, they belong to the dominant category. Those people who have the commanding position in the army, they belong to the dominant category. So that is what Miliband is saying. Miliband is saying that because the state has this kind of linkage with the dominant ruling class, and because at the commanding positions, the dominant class has more representation, that is why the state works in favor of capitalism. That is why the state is more like a instrument, more like a tool. And Miliband offered something more. Miliband further said that we need to differentiate between the ruling class and governing class. All right. In this capitalist society, there is always a difference between the ruling class and the governing class. So governing class is about day-to-day managing the affairs of administration. So for example, the prime minister is the governing class. The bureaucracy is the governing class. But what is the ruling class? You find the ruling class in, of course, the bourgeois houses. You find the ruling class in, let's say, Ambani Industries, let's say Adani Industries, let's say the Tata Group, let's say the Birlas. Is तरीके से Miliband is trying to provide you why the state is working for capitalism in a capitalist society. And what is Miliband's assertion? That it is not just that the state is emerging from the base. It's not just that. Rather, because there is this linkage, because there is disproportionate representation at the commanding position by the people who belong to the dominant class, because there is a lot of coalition going on between the ruling and the governing class, that is why the state works in favor of capitalism. So Miliband's idea is of an instrumental approach. Miliband's idea is coming from a interpersonal relational approach, right? And there is some element of subjectivity as far as Miliband's theory is concerned, है ना? अभी for your UPSC level इससे ज़्यादा आपको जानने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. But then enters one more person, and perhaps in comparison to Miliband, he has received more attention. There are multiple reasons for that. One is that his theory is very intriguing, and number two, he actually writes in a very, what is considered as a very difficult language. So it appears more jargon, है ना, उसका jargon नजर आता है, and people get attracted to that kind of language as well. But I think that the person who responded to Miliband, his theory has a lot of things to offer as far as Marxism is concerned. His name is Nicos Poulantzas. All right. He committed suicide. Perhaps he liked the other world, है ना, उधर ज़्यादा अच्छा लगा होगा. But Poulantzas, and he died very young. I mean, I sometimes wonder what if he was alive today. he would have written so many things, है ना, इतना कुछ लिख चुका होता अभी तक, but I don't know what happened, but whatever it is, Poulantzas tried to argue with Miliband. So Poulantzas is not debating the way Miliband is debating with pluralist and the systems approach. Poulantzas is arguing with Miliband. And Poulantzas says that, you know, it is irrelevant or it is not so crucial to focus on the instrumental ideas. It is not so crucial to ask the question, who takes the decision in the state and why the decision is taken in a particular manner. What we have to understand is that perhaps we need to focus on the structure and how the structure is actually determining the superstructure. What kind of structural idea is behind the performance of the state in a particular sense? And Poulantzas enters the debate with his thought. ये मिटा दूं ये वाला, इसको मिटा देते हैं ताकि फिर आप Poulantzas समझ लें, and then the Marxist theory of state is over. So Miliband appears as a very interesting scholar, na? Do you know what was the profession of son of Miliband? Ralph Miliband is academician. इनका लड़का क्या करता था? Or any idea which kind of political party Ralph Miliband was associated with? In Britain, Labour Party. Your Jeremy Corbyn and all. Even a former professor of political science at DU, Professor Achin Vinayak, he was also from London, ना? फिर वो यहाँ आ गए थे, शायद लंदन में काफी समय रहे हैं वो. So actually Miliband's son was actually a member of the Labour Party as well. And I think he became a minister as well. I'm remembering the name correctly, but he was Miliband's son. So Miliband was coming from this Labour Party idea, and then he's reflecting on Western society. So he's coming from the internal structure of the politics. Whereas Poulantzas is not so much concerned with the internal structure of politics, and Poulantzas provides us with a structural approach. Now, there are many ideas regarding the debate between Miliband and Poulantzas. I think what my teacher taught me is perhaps the best method of explaining it. The Miliband-Poulantzas debate is not at all a major disagreement as far as the idea of state is concerned. Rather, this Miliband-Poulantzas debate is more about a debate on the method. Majorly, this is the fundamental debate. It's a debate on method. If Poulantzas is reflecting the method of structuralism in one way or the other, Miliband is reflecting the method of instrumentalism. Otherwise, the more you go into the method, the more you are able to understand the difference in their opinion. But both are talking about the nature of the state in capitalist society, right? So majorly they both have similar thing to offer. Now what Poulantzas has to offer? There are multiple works which he has written, and Poulantzas says that the direct, and this is the statement that he has used. I have read his book, so from there I am quoting it. See what Poulantzas writes. The direct participation of members of capitalist class in the state apparatus and in government, even if where it exists, is not the important side of the matter. So directly in one statement, he is questioning the idea of Miliband, that the direct participation of the members of capitalist class in the state and government, even if where it exists, is not actually the concern. And then he says that it is not important that who influences important decisions and determines policy. It's not important to understand that. It is not important what is the social background of people who occupy the key positions. So he's again questioning the idea of commanding position. And he further says that the class affiliation of those in the state apparatus is not crucial to its concrete functioning. So majorly, Poulantzas is questioning Miliband's entire argument about the state in capitalist society, that it is not important. When you are reflecting upon the concrete functioning of the state, right? Suppose how the state functions. When you're reflecting upon the concrete functioning of the state, the class affiliation doesn't matter. right? And if the class affiliation doesn't matter, what matters is the structure, right? And that is why Poulantzas is offering a structuralist approach. If Miliband is offering instrumentalist approach, Poulantzas is offering a structuralist approach. And see what he writes in this. And now you might find why Poulantzas is considered as a threat in comparison to Miliband, and why Poulantzas is also looked at as a scholar who had the potential of developing into another Mao. ठीक है, इस तरीके से आप देख सकते हैं. See, Poulantzas has 3 things to offer. रेस्ट जब आप लोग एमए करेंगे तो अपना और पढ़ना है ना. अभी के लिए इतना भी पढ़ लोगे ना, मैं बता रहा हूं तुम्हारे एमए के टीचर ऐसे होंगे, क्या बच्चा है ये, कितना बढ़िया पढ़ के आया है, ठीक है. एंड दे विल बी लाइक ओके तुम मेरे अंडर ही पीएचडी करना है ना, इस तरह का उनके दिमाग में आएगा. नंबर 1, Poulantzas says that the state, the concrete functioning of the state can be divided into 3 sectors. Number 1 is political organization. All right, पहला सेक्टर कौन सा हो सकता है? Political organization. अभी डिटेल में इसको थोड़ा सा बताऊंगा. Just keep on writing like this. The second is political disorganization. ठीक है, the second idea is of political disorganization. And the third is what is said by Poulantzas as political regrouping. Now what Poulantzas is writing, or what Poulantzas is offering, he says the first task of the state, or the concrete function of the state, is the political organization of the dominant or the ruling classes. And why Poulantzas is writing like this? He says that the dominant or the ruling classes have the tendency to get broken into multiple fractions. Okay? So for example, think about the dominant or the ruling class in contemporary society, capitalist society. Is this a capitalist class? So there is a tendency within capitalism, there is a structural tendency that the capitalist class are going to get divided into multiple fractions. So there will be an Adani group, there will be an Ambani group, there will be a Tata group, right? Now the state, go back to the old question, the state is going to refer to a class interest, or in other words, an interest of fraction, or is the state going to work in favor of capitalism? So what will be Poulantzas' answer? The state has to work in favor of capitalism, because class interests have a tendency to get devolved into multiple fractions. So one of the fundamental tasks of the state is to keep the ruling class united, right? अगर मान लो ये fractions में है तो इसको क्या रखना है capitalist class को? It has to keep them united so that they all are thinking from the perspective of capital. And then the second major class of the, or the second major work of the state is to keep the working classes disunited. That is why the term is political disorganization. So किसको आपको disunited रखना है? To keep the working class disunited, because depending on the idea of concentration of resources, coming from this reality, the working class have the tendency to question the hegemony of the ruling class. All right, questioning the hegemony of ruling class. And what is the third major function of the state? The third major function is political regrouping. Now what Poulantzas has to offer here? Just apply your mind. अभी आपने ruling class देख लिया, working class देख लिया. What is it going to offer here? What kind of thinking? किसके बारे में यहां बात होगी? Political regrouping करना हो किसी का. Middle class is part of the ruling class. Middle class is the bourgeois class for them. वो bourgeois का ही ethics को आगे बढ़ाता है, समझ नहीं पाता कि वो worker है. It's here. Working class, the ruling class, the capitalists and the workers, है ना? Bourgeois, proletariat. Simple as that. What is Poulantzas' idea here? Guess करो. Think from this economy ways of production, not the mode of production. As I've taught all of you, there are different ways of producing. Think about different kind of producing classes. Do we just have the working class and the bourgeois class, or there is another group, especially in the Indian context, which is very strong? Bingo, peasants, like peasants. So you have to ensure the regrouping of ग्रुप्स लाइक पीजेंट्स, है ना, तो किसानों को जोड़ो अपने साथ, ठीक है, those classes which are not exactly or which do not exactly fall into the category of proletariat, है ना. So how you have to ensure the regrouping? You can understand it from many examples. Like think about the so-called working classes. They have to keep them disunited, है ना. अगर मान लो रूलिंग क्लास को यूनाइट करना है तो इनको क्या करना है, disunite karna hai. I will give a crude example from the university apparatus. In the university, there are some permanent faculties, there are some ad hoc faculties, there are some temporary faculties, and there are some guest faculties. What is the nature of relation between the permanent faculties and ad hoc faculties? Is it a very good relation? Why? Exploited? Oh my God, people are speaking about revolutionary tones. Why? What kind of exploitative faculties are there? I mean, why is it exploitative relation? What is the relation between, nature of relation between the permanent faculties and the ad hoc faculties? The larger idea of the relation. Is it a good relation? Is it a very benevolent relation? Is it a peaceful relation? Or there is always this tendency that the permanent teachers are like, oh, inko naak ke niche rakho. And the ad hocs are like, oh, they are always treating us like slaves. Hai na? Now imagine, are the permanent faculties not workers? Are they not working for the capital? They are also being part of the ideological state apparatus, but in the end they are workers. Are the ad hoc faculties not workers? Hai na? But don't they remain disunited? And then think about the capitalist class. There are fractions, but the moment any particular capitalist is targeted, the entire capitalism is secured. This is what Poulantzas offered. And he said, it has nothing to do with the links. All it has to do with the structures. The structure compels the state to behave in a particular manner. But here is a fundamental idea, which is that in order to do all this, the state needs to be relatively autonomous. If the state is not relatively autonomous, a state cannot keep the ruling classes united, state cannot keep the working classes disunited, and state cannot lead to the political regrouping of other classes. And then he said that why the state is relatively autonomous? Because in your mode of production or in your base, there is a persistent class struggle going on, right? So it means that just like what Marx had to offer in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, or in the English Question, right? All these works, just like that, Poulantzas is offering that contemporary Western society, there is a persistent class struggle going on. Now, if we have to bring one more thought here, are you all following me? ऐसा तो नहीं है कि समझ नहीं आ रहा है? You are following na? Now, if I have to bring one more thought here, we can find a very interesting thought emerging from Poulantzas, that state, on the one hand, state is a result of this class struggle, isn't it? The nature of the state, concrete functioning, is a result of the class struggle. But when the state is through performing these functions, the state also becomes an active agent in the class struggle. Can't we argue like this? है ना, ये दोनों फैक्टर अब दिखने लगेगा. And one point, the state is the result of the class struggle. At the same point, the state is also functioning as an agent in the class struggle. Or in other words, the state is actually, what he refers is, and this is the conceptual term which he uses, the state is the condensation of class relations. That state is nothing else but the condensation of class relations. Or in other words, what kind of conflict is happening in the base, what kind of struggle that is happening in the base, the state is actually a condensation of all those class forces. And then Poulantzas moves forward, class relation of class forces, Poulantzas moves forward and he says that now when we think about the Marxist from the Marxist framework, that what kind of state do we have, we get this idea that state is actually a site of struggle itself. And depending on the certain historical structural circumstances, we find a particular nature of the state. So this centralized modern state is necessary result of the civil society and the force of the reproduction as far as the contemporary base of society is concerned. This is Poulantzas. Isn't Poulantzas very unique and very, let's say, to the point as far as the work is concerned? But always remember that what Poulantzas is saying from the structural perspective, similar arguments are present in Miliband as well. But the major difference between them is that Poulantzas is following a structural mode of analysis, whereas Miliband is following a instrumental and interpersonal mode of analysis. So suppose I ask you a question now on 150 words, the Miliband-Poulantzas debate. That is how you have to write. But there are some problems with Poulantzas as well. Like what I'm not able to understand is that why Poulantzas is not so much concerned with the internal differentiation of institutions of state. Like the way Miliband is saying, think about contemporary state, Indian state. Isn't there a kind of ideological or let's say ideas-based struggle going on between the executive and the judiciary? Ain't it happening? It is happening. So when it is happening, why Poulantzas is not so much concerned with the internal differentiation of the state? Second is, if the state is a site of struggle, then why Poulantzas is not providing us with lot of input on how the working classes can actually dominate the state? Like coming from the idea of democracy and let's say workers' right and elections. But where Poulantzas is right is that when the state is relatively autonomous, then for some time, the state is also able to work in favor of the working classes. Like next year is the election year. So this year you got less, a reduction of 200 rupees on the cylinder. Next year is the election year. We have got the call for the special session of parliament. And we are expecting that Berogzari, Bhatta and all these things will come in. Next year is the election year. We might find that 2,000 rupees are getting credited every month now to the peasant interest. Next year is the election year. You might find that suddenly Ladli Yojana and Arogya Yojana and Phalana Yojana and other Yojanas are launched. Next year is the election year. So you might find that, despite, think about it. If the so-called state has to work in the favor of the ruling classes, what's the point of Narega? Why do we have a policy like Manarega? As simple as that. It is again to make sure that the working class remain disunited. So when the state is relatively autonomous, it is also able to work as such in favor of the welfare policies. But in the larger idea, in the longer run, state is always going to serve the ruling class. And at this moment of the modern state, the ruling class is the capitalist class. Is this clear? Then there are other ideas. So for example, there is one person whose name is Bob Jessop. Bob Jessop perhaps falls under the neo-Marxist category. And as far as Bob Jessop idea is concerned, I don't want all of you to teach him a lot because this will be beyond the scope of UPSC, but one comment is of course required here. Bob Jessop looks at state as the crystallization of political strategies. All right, कैसे देखता है ये? Crystallization of political strategies. So Bob Jessop is not just referring to state only from the perspective of old Marxist discourse. And Jessop is saying that in the end, what state reflects at a particular moment in history, the so-called balance of class forces that is reflected in the state. And then you have people like Claus Off or Chantal Mouffe, they have written something more on it, but we don't need to go further down in the Marxist discourse. This is in a nutshell what the Marxist theory of state is all about. And there is one point which I want to add to all of you from one of my notes that I created way back. Now, if we look at the way Mr. John Hoffman has tried to provide a summary of the Marxist theory of state, three thoughts emerge. According to John Hoffman, in the Marxist discourse, the first is the instrumental view of the state. It's already present. The second view is the reductionism, that the state is nothing but actually a result of the class contradictions, which is also connected with the structuralist view of the state. And the third is idea of catastrophism. And this is something that you must have not heard before. The third idea is of catastrophism. And in this catastrophism framework, the Marxists argue that in the end, no matter what the state does, there is going to be a contradiction and class struggle and a revolutionary momentum possible. These are the three fundamental ideas which dominate the so-called Marxist theory of state. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Any doubt? Is this clear? So you got the Miliband, Gramsci, Poulantzas, Jessop and John Hoffman. ठीक है? अब इसको लिख लो. Write it down. Give a heading. Understanding Marxist theory of state. Understanding Marxist theory of state through scholarly interventions. Through scholarly interventions. And write like this. According to John Hoffman, point number 1. According to John Hoffman, the Marxist theory criticizes state. According to John Hoffman, the Marxist theory criticizes state on three fundamental grounds. On three fundamental grounds, which provide understanding regarding the state as well. Which provide understanding regarding the state as well. Subpoint number 1, instrumentalism. Subpoint number 1, instrumentalism. Dash. The state is seen, dash, the state is seen as an instrument. The state is seen as an instrument of dominant class, and it does not has its own autonomy or dynamism. Or does not possess its own autonomy or dynamism, full stop. Right, the second subpoint, reductionism, dash, state is seen as part of superstructure, which is an epiphenomenon. As part of superstructure, which is an epiphenomenon, 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 derived from the economic base, which reduces the specific role of state in society. Derived from the economic base, which reduces the specific role of state in society. Full stop, right? The third subpoint, catastrophism, dash, the assumption that the relation between bourgeoisie, B-O, है ना, लिखना आता है ना bourgeoisie, ठीक है, that the relation between bourgeoisie and proletariat, within bracket write French terms, bourgeoisie and proletariat, within bracket write French terms, will increasingly polarize as an inevitable, consequence of capitalist crisis, so that the need to allow for conscious political intervention from above and below becomes redundant. Full stop. 3 subpoints finished. Write the next point. For Marxists, classes emerge through production process. Semicolon. Always in a relationship of surplus production and appropriation. Dash based on exploitation. Now write the next point. Within the Marxist discourse, Antonio Gramsci, comma, Louis Althusser, comma, Ralph Miliband, comma, Nicos Poulantzas, and scholars like Bob Jessop, etc., are the prominent names. And their major arguments regarding state are following. Subpoint number 1, Antonio Gramsci. Dash, he introduced this idea into Marxism, that the domination of the ruling class is not secured through coercion alone. Full stop. Rather, there is a prominent role of ideological manipulation. Now write into the same paragraph. The state for Gramsci is force plus consent, or hegemony dash coercion, in which the civil society provides consent, while the political society provides force. Or organizes force, the way you want to write it. And just write this idea of hegemony. For Gramsci, write the last point. For Gramsci, hegemony is the ability of the dominant class. To secure the consent of those classes, to secure the consent of those classes, it dominates. Full stop. Next subpoint, Louis Althusser. Next subpoint, Louis Althusser. And write like this, Althusser reflected on the matrix of social formation, and prevalence of three major structures, dash political, comma economic, dash political, comma economic, and ideological. Full stop. He insisted that there are different spheres in society, and one sphere usually dominates, at a particular period in time or history, like religion in human history. Full stop. But for Althusser, in the last instance, economy will determine. Full stop. Taking cue from Marx and Gramsci, Althusser developed the concept of two distinct but related coercive instruments that secure the stability and continuation of the capitalist mode of production. Full stop. These include the repressive state apparatus. Within bracket, write law courts, police, army, etc. Law courts, police, army, etc. that relies on violence, and ideological state apparatus, like trade union, family, media, and most importantly, education system. You must have seen the 9 PM prime time debates na in the media. कोई चैनल उठा लो, बात जो है एक ही मिलेगी, ठीक है. सो दिस इज ग्रामशी डन, अल्थुसर डन, है ना. मार्क्स का तो कल ही करा दिया था पिछली क्लास में. नाउ राइट द नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट, Ralph Miliband, and write like this: the year 1969 brought a new turn in Marxist theory. brought a new turn in Marxist theory with publication of Miliband's The State in Capitalist Society. The State in Capitalist Society. Full stop. In this book, Miliband noted the growing centrality of the state in Western society, comma, assessed the relationship Marx posited between class and the state, assessed the relationship Marx posited between class and the state, and reflected on the pluralist model of state society relationship. Now for Miliband, use sub points. Okay, so next sub point, first one. For Miliband, the contemporary Western society has a dominant or ruling class, which controls or owns the means of production, full stop. Next sub point, it has close links with powerful institutions. Like political parties, comma, media, comma, military, and the universities, etc. Full stop. Third sub point, it has disproportionate representation at all levels of the state. Especially in the commanding positions, comma, which also gets reflected in the social background of civil servants, comma, their ideological dispositions, etc. Next sub point, Miliband differentiated between the governing, within bracket write day-to-day administration, and the ruling class. Governing, within bracket write day-to-day administration and the ruling class, full stop. And write the last point, his approach is subjectivist, comma, based on interpersonal links between state and the ruling class, and provides an instrumental variant of the Marxist theory of state. Full stop. Miliband finished. Now write the name. Next point, sub point, Nicos Poulantzas. थक गए हैं? No, देखो ऑप्शनल में लिखना है Nicos Poulantzas, and I can write a blank check. किसी भी कोचिंग के नोट्स उठा लेना and just compare. कि आपको वहां पर ऐसा कंटेंट मिल जाए, बट ऑलवेज रिमेंबर इसको कहीं देना मत, वरना तुम लोग गए काम से। नहीं, हो जाएगा, हो जाएगा। रट्टा मारने में भारत के लोग महान हैं, किसी को मत देना। आई एम टेलिंग यू व्हाई, द रीजन बीइंग, डोंट गिव दीज नोट्स टू एनीबडी. Reason is that they might mug it up and they might be well versed with the technique of bringing thoughts together and writing a good answer. Are you getting my point or not? Don't share your material with anybody. See, if you had been learning in university, I would have said ठीक है कर लो, है ना? But as a teacher, I have to tell you everything, है ना? मुझे तो सब पढ़ाना ही है आपको. आप लोग कल को ये रट के पढ़ाने भी आ जाएं क्लास में तो भी मेरे साथ नहीं पढ़ा पाएंगे. फिलहाल तो नहीं कर पाओगे, 5 साल बाद जरूर कर लोगे व्हेन यू आर हाई इनटू स्टडीज. बट व्हाट आई वांट फ्रॉम ऑल ऑफ यू इज कि आप लोग ये नोट्स अपने तक रखना, किसी से शेयर मत करना, नॉट इवन आउट ऑफ दिस फ्रेंडली रिक्वायरमेंट कि अरे मेरा दोस्त है कोई नहीं तू पढ़ ले. ऐसा ये काम मैं करता था. और एज अ जो तैयारी आप कर रहे हैं जिस पेपर की, यू कैन नॉट अफोर्ड इट. आई एम सॉरी टू से, बट don't go for it. Like, just think about it, that you are actually, for today's class, I have referred to this book as well. This is Political Theory and the Modern State. ये पूरी किताब इसी पर है. And just look at the name of the chapter. It's by Mr. David Held. And the name of the chapter is chapter number 2, Class, Power and the State. ठीक है, अब आप इस वाली किताब को आपको लगता है कि पढ़ाया जा रहा होगा? This book is not taught, but this book is essential for the Delhi University people. कि वहां से जरूरी किताब से आपको पढ़ना चाहिए. One more thing, liberalism, Marxism and the future directions of public policy. So what I have done, I went through the entire chapter कि क्या क्या लिखा है ना. अब कुछ चीजें छोड़नी पड़ेंगी, like clause of, मुझे नहीं लगता कि मुझे आपको पढ़ाने की जरूरत है. Reason being, clause of पढ़ के आप लोग बहुत ज्यादा मार्क्सिज्म में चले जाएंगे, है ना, और वो पेपर की रिक्वायरमेंट नहीं है. बट या मिलिबेंड, पोलांजा, इसके बारे में जानकारी आपके पास होना चाहिए. सो लास्ट वन, निकोस, पोलांजा, एंड राइट लाइक दिस. पोलांजा had a debate with Miliband. Poulantzas had a debate with Miliband, and he argued that within double inverted comma, that the direct participation of members of the capitalist class in the state apparatus and in government is not the important side of the matter, double inverted comma, finished, full stop. The class affiliation of those in the state apparatus is not that crucial to its concrete functioning in comparison to the structural components. Full stop. Right, the next first sub point within Poulantzas, state is the unifying element in capitalism. State is the unifying element in capitalism, and it must function, is the unifying element in capitalism, and it must function to ensure three things. Next point, the political organization of the dominant classes, comma, which because of competitive pressures and differences of immediate interest and differences of immediate interest are continually broken. Immediate interests are continually broken into class fractions. Continually broken into class fractions dash to keep the ruling class united dash to keep the ruling class united, full stop. Next point, the political disorganization of working classes, the political disorganization of working classes dash, which because of the concentration of production, can threaten the hegemony of ruling classes, full stop. Next point, the political regrouping by ideological process of classes from the non-dominant modes of production, who could act against the state, like the peasants, full stop. Next point, the state can only unite the ruling classes if it is relatively autonomous from particular interests of diverse fractions, full stop. इसी में लिखो, it is not a monolithic block, and state power or its autonomy is incomplete as well, full stop. Right, the final point, for Poulantzas, the modern state is an arena of conflict and schism, schism. This is the term he uses, conflict and schism, within bracket write condensation of class forces, and hence it is the necessary result of the competition as well as a major force in the reproduction of such competition and division, ठीक है. बॉब जेसप वाला वगैरह अभी नहीं कराऊंगा क्योंकि उसको कराने की जरूरत फिलहाल इसमें नहीं लिखवाऊंगा, वो एड में होगा ना, उसी में से देख लेना. ऑलराइट, सो दिस इज योर इन अ नटशेल द मार्क्सिस्ट थ्योरी ऑफ द स्टेट. नाउ इफ दे आस्क यू एनी क्वेश्चन you can easily answer it now. Is this clear? हाँ, कोई डाउट तो नहीं है मार्क्सिस्ट थ्योरी ऑफ स्टेट में? Each of the theorists is appearing wonderful, na? I mean, they have worked hard on their theory. So just in case You now go for UPSC and they ask you a question of Marxist theory of state. You must have around 300 words in your hand with you. तो आज आप लोगों को सारा वो मिल गया. Let's move forward. You need a break? No? Yes? Okay. 5 minutes break. Chalo. Then we study the pluralist theory of state. Then we complete the feminist theory of state. ये दो भी आज ही कर लो, है ना? अच्छा. So I also have a good news for all of you that I also take the GS classes here, na? So from tomorrow I'm out of the English and from Monday I'm out of the Hindi. So I will get this ample time to move with the optional course, like proper full time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take around 3.5 or 4 hour classes for 1 week. ठीक है. सो उसमें क्या होगा, ट्यूसडे आप मेरे पास 9 बजे से लेके 1 बजे तक होगे. मैं बीच में 15 मिनट का 10 मिनट का ब्रेक दे दूंगा, बट उससे क्या होगा, हम लोग बहुत अच्छे से कोर्स को और ज़्यादा आगे बढ़ा लेंगे. नहीं, वाई कांट वी डू दैट टिल द टाइम वी हैव दिस टाइम. कि अभी देखो जैसे हमारे पास समय रहता है ना थोड़ा सा, तो अभी मुझे क्या है 2 बजे फिर एक क्लास में जाना है, तो अब उस टाइम पे 2 बजे नहीं जाना होगा, तो मैं क्या सोचूंगा 1 बजे तक हम लोग अपना काम कर लें, है ना. एंड नाउ आई थिंक आप लोगों का इंटरेस्ट अब जाग गया होगा पॉलिटिकल साइंस में, कि ऑप्शनल का अब आप लोगों को अच्छा लगने लगा होगा. आई एम होपफुल कि मैं ठीक पढ़ा रहा हूँ आप लोगों को, मजा आ रहा है तुम लोगों को ना. तो अब क्या होगा, आपका इंटरेस्ट जगा है तो फिर इसको और अच्छे से हम लोग कर सकते हैं. चलो, टेक अ 5 minutes ब्रेक, देन वी स्टार्ट. अच्छा, एक बार दिखाना अपने नोट्स कोई मुझे भी. क्या छूटा है बताओ, क्या है, कौन सा वाला है? एंड देयर आइडियोलॉजिकल डिस्पोजिशन, एंड देयर आइडियोलॉजिकल डिस्पोजिशंस. एक बार आप लोग अपने नोट्स दिखाना सब लोग जरा, मैं भी देखूं कैसे लिख रहे हो तुम लोग. अच्छा, सो इट इज, always remember, लगा ही था मुझे. Poulantzas. किस किसने पोलांजा का स्पेलिंग क्या लिखा है? पोलांजा का स्पेलिंग लिखो. हाँ हाँ, पोलांजा का स्पेलिंग लिखो, POULANTZAS, निकोस पोलांजा. ठीक है. एंड दिस इज बॉब जेसप, JESSOP. Gramsci, Althusser is S. Neoliberal theory of state. अच्छा, Katrina McKinnon. Personal relations, personal relations. Political philosophy. Art of government. David Easton. Limits. ये सारा क्लास से है? इतना बड़ा पढ़ लियो तुम लोग? जहां जहां पेंसिल से लिखा है ना, इसको तुरंत जेरोक्स कर लेना, बिकॉज व्हाट विल हैपन, पेंसिल वाला एक टाइम के बाद हट जाएगा। ये तो बड़े अच्छे नोट्स बन गए हैं ये है? नोट्स तो तुम लोग का काफी कमाल का बन गया फिर तो है, अच्छा हो गया। ओके, डू वन थिंग, व्हेन वी फिनिश पॉलिटिकल थ्योरी ना, मतलब 3 अक्टूबर से पहले कर लेना है इसको, तो ये जितना पॉलिटिकल थ्योरी का नोट्स होगा जो लिखा हुआ है मैंने क्लास में, इसका एक जेरोक्स मैं करा लूंगा। क्योंकि अपना नोट्स दिखाना जरा, देखें क्या क्या कर रहे हो तुम। कॉपी में क्यों नहीं है ये सब? Okay, this is, I like this handwriting. This is a calligraphy handwriting. Very good. Theory? No, it was only good on the front first page. उसके बाद घचड़ मचड़ हो गया है, थोड़ा बड़ा बड़ा लिखो। सैमुअल जॉनसन, हेनरी एडम्स। अच्छा, टेल मी आदित्य ना, how will you figure it out what is the important argument in this page? You have to read it, but learn it from Vandana. So what she's doing, she's using multiple color pens. That is always a good strategy. Now what is going to happen? Whatever you find it important, use a different pen. It will give you a better insight, huh? Alright, ये हो गया पॉलिटिकल थ्योरी पे, वेरी गुड। ये तो पॉलिटी आ गया नीचे, ये आपका हुआ पॉलिटिकल थ्योरी। और कहाँ लिखा है? कॉपी में लिखा है, सेम मेथड अप्लाई किया है। एक बार दिखाओ जरा। एम्पावर, एम्पायर, पॉलिटी ऑफ एस्टेट्स। ठीक है, ये बीच में छूटा क्यों है? अच्छा, ये लिखना होगा है ना? ठीक है, तुम्हारा कहाँ है? ये है ना, मैं देख सकता हूँ ना सब लोगों का, मतलब देखो दिमाग में बहुत सारी चीजें रहती हैं। ये तो स्टेट से शुरू हो गया सीधा, ऐसा क्यों? कम हियर, ये सीधा, अच्छा ये सिलेबस लेके, और ठीक है, हाँ बैठो बैठो बैठो, ठीक है। यू राइट, बहुत बड़ा बड़ा है ना, 3 मतलब विचित्र किस्म के सब लोग हो। एक है उसका तो पढ़ा ही नहीं, अभी मैंने आया नहीं आज वो, उसका नोट्स पे कहाँ है? तो अब तो खत्म होने वाली है क्लास। उसके लिए तो आज भी नया था। निकोलस पोलांजा आप समझ लेगा क्या खुद से वो? इसलिए कहता हूं एक एक क्लास आप लोगों को ना, सी व्हाट हैपेंस, इट्स एनर्जी। क्या हो गया उसको? मीजल्स? बोलो वहीं वापस जाए, मैं उसके घर आके पढ़ा दूंगा उसको। पता लगे सबको बीमार करेगा। अच्छा ये लिखा है, तुम थोड़ा सा शिवम, हाँ अच्छा अंशु, थोड़ा सा छोटा लिखो और सेम मल्टीपल कलर के पेन्स आपको ऊपर रखने हैं, है ना? जैसे ये लोग, किसी को ग्रीन पेन अभी चाहिए? नहीं चलो अभी लिखवाऊंगा नहीं, तुम लोग थके हुए नजर आ रहे हो, समझा देता हूं तो ये भी आपका हो जाएगा। राइट, सो लिबरल भी आप लोगों ने बहुत अच्छे से लिखा और मार्क्सिस्ट थ्योरी भी आप लोगों ने अच्छे से कर लिया, है ना? करें, चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं, ठीक है? अच्छा ये मैं हमेशा करता हूं, आई कीप ऑन लुकिंग एट नोट्स, तो कॉपीज आपके बैग में हमेशा होनी चाहिए, कभी भी हो सकता है सडनली। सो लेट्स हैव सम काइंड ऑफ रेजिमेंटल अप्रोच जिसको बोलते हैं ना, लेट्स हैव सम काइंड ऑफ वेरी रेजिमेंटल डिसिप्लिन, है ना? लेट्स इमेजिन दैट आई एम हियर एज अ कमांडिंग अथॉरिटी एंड वट एवर आई एम आस्किंग यू हैव टू प्रोवाइड मी। उससे क्या होगा? Of course, not in a coercive state apparatus, but in a very productive state apparatus. If we can have it in the class, it will help you to qualify. Not just your UPSC. I can guarantee that on the basis of these notes, you can qualify any entrance examination of your life. है ना? तो तुम लोग समझ लो DU कितने बच्चों का नुकसान हो रहा होगा, मैं वहां नहीं हूं अब, है ना? So, है ना, बहुत सारे बच्चे जो हैं, I remember my students call me, even the students I taught at Khalsa College, ना, 28th April 2019 was my last working day in that college. So 19 to 20, 20, 21, 20 to 22, oh, almost 4 years, man. 4 years I have left the college apparatus. And in the past 4 years, the students I taught way back, so you can say it's a 7 years relation now. And they still have my number. I'm still in a WhatsApp group with them. And they still ask me many things. That, sir, अभी मैं PhD कर रहा हूँ यहाँ से, ये वाला एक चीज़ था, ये मुझे ज़रा बता दीजिएगा। सो स्टूडेंट्स के साथ एक रिश्ता आपका हमेशा होना चाहिए। सेम विद this and the Directorate of Training, Unitary Civil Services, वहाँ पे, like on Monday, I mean tomorrow I had to go, but I said a no to them this time because हिंदी का बच्चा जो उनका भी classes चल रहा है ना morning में optional का, so there I have to provide training on sexual harassment. So in the last session, they were like, there were many of the, some of my, one of teacher was also present in that training program. He has joined this department. So he was like, oh, I said, sir, आपको क्या पढ़ाऊँ? बोला नहीं, अब आज तुम टीचर की तरह हो तो पढ़ाओ. So I taught them, and so these two places majorly alike, and this is like my full-time commitment, because the people who are behind this idea of prospect IAS, they are very ethical. So you can sense it that we are not here to, you know, have a Lamborghini kind of thing. So you're always in the mind of teaching. You have to teach, and you have to teach in a very reasonable manner and try to do hard work. I mean, if I look at the classes that are happening in name of political science, it's pathetic. I mean, they are not teaching. Like seriously, I mean, you expect from a teacher to grant you something, and that teacher is the best teacher who is always willing to give. The moment the teacher starts thinking to take na, khatam ho gaya wahan pe teaching uska. So you have to give all the time. Anyways, so let's begin with the pluralist theory of state, okay? It is going to be very easy for all of you. Reason being that they have a strong liberal lineage. Alright? Why it is going to be easy? Because they have a strong liberal lineage. So in one way or the other, pluralist theory of state has liberal foundations. Akash, इसमें भर दो जरा, ये खत्म हो रहा है, ठीक है? So pluralist theory of state has liberal foundations. So what do we mean by this? Do you recall how the early liberal thought about the state as an empire, है ना? As a neutral referee, है ना? So think about like this. So there, for them, state is like umpire. A state is more like a referee, right? And when we go with the liberal lineage, there is a huge presence of the idea of social contract theory, isn't it? And as per the social contract theory, the two major variants that you have to remember, One is the version of Mr. Thomas Hobbes, है ना? And do you all now remember the name of the book? Else Leviathan, है ना? The sea monster. And the second is the version of Mr. John Locke. And what's the name of the book of John Locke? The two treatises on government, and majorly we are referring to the second treatise, right? But even though both these scholars, they fall under the idea of the social contract theory tradition, their ideas are very different, है ना? So for Hobbes, if there is no state, there is no order. Or in other words, the existence of civilized life, the existence of civilized life is dependent upon the existence of the state. This is the Hobbesian world. And if there is no state, the life of the man is nasty, brutish, short, or it's a condition of war of all against all. It's an endless war, right? But when we think about this from the perspective of Mr. John Locke has a different thing to offer. He is not following this trajectory. But he definitely says, if there is no law, there is no freedom, right? Law and freedom go hand in hand. And perhaps the state's major work is to protect the natural rights of the individual, which the state itself can't violate because these rights are natural. So there is an element of civilized life present before the state as well. And that is why the role of the state here in the Lockean framework, state is not like a master. State is like a proper servant to society. Whereas in the Hobbesian framework, state appears as the master. So when we look at it from the pluralist theory, this entire Lockean framework, social contract, state being an empire or a referee, and you merge it with the idea of power, we get what is considered as the plural idea of the state. And what the pluralists are offering us, pluralists are saying that power is dispersed in the society. ठीक है, पहला argument ये लोग क्या देते हैं, that power is dispersed in the society. Hey, how are you? What happened to you? Measles तो नहीं हुआ है ना तुमको, हैं? पता लगे तुम वो जाओ, उड़ जाओ, है ना? So power is dispersed in society. Like, think about it. Suppose I say that power is dispersed. Will you agree with me? Is it dispersed? Where do you find power? Are you powerful? There is an old famous quote. If anything changed by elections, they will never have it. Changed by elections, they will never have it. But we are UPSC aspirants, so of course elections change everything. But yeah, fine, right to vote, good example. What else? Do you have power? Give me some other example that, okay sir, yes, we have power. And power is dispersed, power is wide. Whatever way you want to understand is wide and dispersed. So you are coming with the cultural power of local people in the village? All right, so there's still the lordship kind of things, or let's say the Bhudari classes. Any other, do women have power in the society? Do you have power? In this class, definitely you have it, but outside? He has more power, you have more power, he has more power, comparatively outside. But I mean, suppose anybody out there on the street is harassing you. Is he going to get beaten or not? There will be a lot of people who are going to apply power on him. कैसे कैसे छेड़ दिया है ना? Suddenly another harasser will turn out to be the big brother. I am here to protect you, right? So this is how pluralists look at the world. And pluralists are saying, when power is wide and dispersed, think about that there are multiple kind of interests, right, which prevail. And since power is dispersed, these interests are definitely going to affect the way a state is going to function, isn't it? Can we argue it like this? And that is why they further argued that state is not in favor of any particular interest or any particular group. So think about this, and the pluralists say that the Marxist idea that the state is favor of a particular class is wrong, right? Why? क्या हुआ? इसके बाद feminist theory of state बहुत simple है, with all respect to feminism, because for your UPSC perspective they only ask you two kind of questions, तो उससे ज़्यादा आप उसमें जा नहीं सकते. In the Marxist they have sometimes asked very difficult questions, तो वो मैंने करवा दिया. So you refer to the notes. Poulantzas वगैरह सब खत्म है. क्या करोगे तुम अब? वीडियो देखोगे? हाँ ठीक है. So suppose Marxists are saying that state is there going to serve the class interest. Pluralists क्या बोलेंगे? बकवास, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है, right? Pluralists are saying if power is wide and dispersed, a state cannot work in a particular for a particular group, or a state cannot work for a particular class interest or any such that, right? So it means that state is definitely going to behave, or it is going to be like this cushion. Now, why cushion? Because every other interest group is going to try to provide some kind of authority, है ना, over the state, or to look for some kind of control over the state, and then these different interests are going to compete with each other. This means that that is how the pluralist theory of state says that state is the servant of society. State is not the master. So you can understand in one stroke, pluralists are against Hobbes, pluralists are against Marxists, and pluralists to some extent are also revising the Lockean framework by turning out that state is completely the servant of the society. And one of the major scholars who has referred to this work is the Schwarzmantel's idea. Okay? There was a person who actually commented on this, Schwarzmantel, and he said that state is like a servant, not the master. But there are certain key assumptions. When you think about pluralist theory of state, there are certain key assumptions behind this theory. And if we have to provide an analytical vantage point to the key assumptions, you can divide it into two sectors. The first sector is that the so-called state bodies are impartial, or what is considered as the idea of impartiality of the state, which means that when you think about parliament, okay, चाहे आप बात करो parliament की, when we think about, let's say, bureaucracy, when we think about, let's say, judiciary, when we think about army, these institutions of the state are impartial, which means that they must conform to the principles of public service and political accountability. So being impartial, a state works for or in favor of public services and always follow the idea of political accountability. From these two vantage points, the second key assumption develops that for pluralists, democratic processes are meaningful and effective. And otherwise, how can you ensure that a state is working for public service and a state is politically accountable? Which means that pluralists argue that democratic processes, so for example, as Aditya said, elections, right, which gives us power, democratic processes are meaningful, democratic processes are substantial, democratic processes are relevant, or in other words, democratic processes are not redundant. Okay? They are actually important. This is the idea of pluralism as it actually developed as far as the theory part is concerned. So pluralists are going to reflect a lot on how the interest groups are competing with each other, right? How they are articulating multiple goals. They are going to look at how political parties are actually operating under the state sphere. They are going to understand how the civil society is working. This is how they start with it, right? Then there are fundamental concerns on how to make sense of the pluralist theory of state. So for example, if we ask a question, is bureaucracy really impartial? Is it impartial? Like, let's talk not the UPSC, but let's talk about political science. How have you understood bureaucracy as far as political science is concerned? Is it impartial always? Do we expect the bureaucracy to be impartial? Yes. Shall the bureaucracy ought to be impartial? Normative theory, yes. In the behavioral sense, is it impartial, or there is definitely some element of caste and class working as far as the bureaucratic person is concerned? So we find in the behavioral sense there is an element of some kind of tilt towards a particular group, right? Like, let's take it from an example. Suppose you are the district magistrate, है ना? And there is a person who belongs to Ambani group of industries, Reliance, है ना? A delegate from Reliance. There is a person nearby village area, he is the biggest landlord, right? There are some people from Delhi who are expecting to open up a library in the district for UPSC preparation. तीसरा ये लोग आए हैं. And fourth, you students who just want something. हमको पैसा चाहिए, or whatever it is, right? Tell me this preference model, with whom you are going to meet first and why? Number one is Reliance Industry, second option is landlord, third is of course let's say some delegates from Delhi, and fourth are students. सबसे पहले किससे मिलोगे? DM हो तुम लोग. And be very pragmatic in your approach. Reliance वाले से अंशु, landlord से you, student से you, Reliance. Okay, so we have majority of Reliance here. है ना? Now I want to ask all of you, why landlord? Okay, why students? You are a district magistrate. You are dealing with an entire district and you are going to meet students first. Their time is important. What kind of future will they have when there are no industries? What kind of future will... No, I will counter the question, right? Because that is how you will get grilled in your interview. What kind of future? Suppose they ask you this question in your personality test. They might ask you this kind of question to understand your attitude. Why you will meet the Reliance guy first? Invest. You? Okay, so you people in your mind are thinking from the developmental perspective, the modernist mind. You are coming with the idea of a dominance in the local area, the pehle usko niptao, and you are coming with a very normative idea, okay, what ought to be, right? But now just think about it. If I bring the Reliance and the dominant class together, Reliance के इसलिए मिल रहे हो क्योंकि आएगा पैसा, and then पैसा is actually coming from already existing dominance of the industry. Isn't it? Suppose there is a Reliance person, there is a landlord, and there is a new startup guy. वो भी तो आके invest करेगा, but सबसे पहले अब startup वाले से मिलोगे कि पहले Reliance से ही मिलोगे? Of course, you will think about Reliance because there is a prevailing dominance. So that is why he said that when we think pluralist school of thought, this idea that state is always impartial, state has no interests of its own, etc., they actually bring some concern in the mind. And this was something which was taken up by the modern pluralist. So for example, if you think about the writings of work of people like Robert Dahl, you must have heard the name polyarchy. This you have to study in democracy. Or for example, if you have heard about this person's name, Charles Lindblom, ठीक है, ये बहुत बड़ा नाम है जो रहा है. One more American guy, J.K. Galbraith, ठीक है. जब आप इन लोगों की writings को पढ़ते हैं ना, like I have read the original work by Mr. Galbraith. Galbraith has actually showed not like the structural idea of Poulantzas or Marxist framework. He's a very much a pluralist guy, and they say that some things have changed as far as the contemporary Western society is concerned. What has changed? They said that there is in the so-called multiple interest, or there is in the so-called dispersal of power, some element of inequality, which means that definitely in the society, some interests are going to dominate over other interests. For example, the business houses, they are definitely going to dominate in comparison to peasants, no matter what happens, no matter how much robust the electoral process is. Then they further said something else. They said that also if you are thinking that there is no unique private interest of the state, or state is just an impartial referee State is the servant, not the master. It's a wrong idea. Perhaps today, state is a major political actor, and it also serves its own interest. I can give you two further arguments here, one from the Indian example, one a theoretical example. Let's first start with the theoretical example. There is an idea in the neoliberal framework that we must stop the welfare state. Why? Because it leads to bureaucratic oversupply. So think about this. You become a district magistrate. You will find many videos on YouTube that people out there, the new DM, etc., what they are doing, they're staying there and they're announcing some new policy, right? When you think about this new policy, so you are actually becoming the provider, and there is some kind of legitimacy being gained that if we do not have the district magistrate, we cannot have development. If we do not have the DM, we cannot have affluence. If we do not have the DM, we cannot have growth. But speaking behaviorally or in a pragmatic manner, industry is used by the industrial laborer as well as the investment provider. There is no role of the DM as such, except the regulatory role. Like, think about this. There is a piece of land. You need investment for creation of an industry. You need workers and you need transport. You need police, etc. for protection. But there is no such important role of the DM there at that particular point in the production process. The major work is done by the industry and the workers, isn't it? Is it right or wrong? But why do we have this persistent provision to sustain the civil services? That is how the pluralists want to understand it. That is it not possible that perhaps the state has developed its own interest of continuation and persistent survival? Is it not possible that state frames the policy in a manner that it remains one of the most pivotal force? Whatever that is being done. So for example, this will be the duty of the public servant. There will be the commanding authority. I am going to tell. And especially in the post-colonial societies, we find it more evidently. In the Western societies, there is a less evidence about this claim. So one is the model of bureaucratic oversupply. There is one more model from where we can understand what the pluralists are trying to offer. The peasants were protesting on the outskirts of Delhi. It was happening, na? So were they protesting against the judiciary or the executive? Executive. So they were questioning the 3 farm laws, etc., etc. The protest was lingering, it was going on, a very long protest. What happened in that protest? Why they stopped? Or what kind of approach multiple institutions of the state actually took? Police took off removing them. Executive did not listen except some delegates. What happened in that entire time period? Do you remember something which the judiciary has done? What the judiciary did in that particular time period during the peasant protest on the outskirts of Delhi? क्या किया था न्यायपालिका ने? उन्होंने कुछ कहा था? You don't remember? ये ध्यान नहीं दिया किसी का? Suddenly, judiciary intervened, and the judiciary said to the farmer delegates that we are now looking into the matter and we have asked the government to look into the matter. Now remove the protest, leave the space. The farmers said, why? How can we be sure of? And the judiciary replied, so you think that we are not going to listen to you and you are questioning what the judiciary is saying. And then suddenly they started pressurizing the protesters to leave the space. All of a sudden, when the executive was facing a political crisis, judiciary, which is considered as an instrument of the government or an organ of the government which always keeps the executive accountable, suddenly it came to protect the executive. Can't we read this in this manner as well? That when the executive is always made accountable by the judiciary, there on the YouTube you will find IS क्या बन रहे हो, जज बनो, IS की भी खाट खड़ी कर सकते हो, इस तरह की बातें वहां आपको मिल जाएंगी. And suddenly you find during the farmers' protest, all of a sudden, nobody asked the judiciary to come in. They entered, they said, now we have taken the matter under our control. We have told the government they are going to do something for you. Ab tum jagah khali karo. There is no need for having the protest. Certainly the political vitality and the political, fighting going on, certainly judiciary comes and protects the state. Because nothing can surpass the state. The state must be protected. That is what the pluralists are now saying. Pluralists are saying that don't go for Marxist approach alone. There is a problem with the Marxist approach. They only look at the question of the class. Try to understand it from the perspective of state. So what has happened? Number one, state has emerged into a major political actor and it has developed its own interest. And now the state is behaving as a major interest group in the larger political structure of the governance of society. And that is why they have said that if you want to understand the way modern state works, follow the process of or the thought of autonomy of democratic state in modern democracies. And then this is in a nutshell what the pluralist theory of state is all about. It's an easy theory. The reason being it has the liberal lineage. So we don't need to repeat what the liberals have said. But now I have a question for all of you. What is the difference between the liberal theory of state and the pluralist theory of state? Because if it has a liberal lineage, then why two different theories? What is the difference between, major difference between the liberal theory of state and the pluralist theory of state? Pluralists are saying state is having no interest. State is like a neutral arbiter. State is a servant of society, not a master, right? State is there to protect us. State is there to serve us, right? Liberals have a similar idea. Both have their origin in the social contractarian tradition, following the Lockean framework. So what's the difference between the liberal theory of state and the Marxist pluralist theory of state? One single difference, and you will get the entire theory. Guess karo. What is at the center of the liberal theory of state? Individual and its rights. Where is the individual in the pluralist theory of state? There are interests, not the individual. There are groups. There are pressure groups. There are organizations. There are so-called clientele relations. There are patronizing groups. So liberals, when they focus on individual, pluralists are moving beyond the individual. They are looking at other kind of formations. And that is why you will find the idea of polyarchy prevailing in the pluralist theory, that the power is dispersed at the social level and multiple groups are actually reflecting it on the pincushion of the state. That's it. This is in a nutshell your pluralist theory of state. Okay, so political actor as itself, etc, etc. ठीक है, और कुछ जानने की जरूरत है? That's it, nothing more. Any doubt? हाँ, एम्पायर और अंपायर का, umpire, okay, no, stop laughing. Empire and umpire, so it's not coming from history. Empire is a historical thing. Umpire is like a referee. So have you watched a cricket match? No. Yeah, that is the umpire we are referring to. Have you watched a boxing match? Ever played any game? Huh? Which game have you played? Badminton. So there is a person sitting on the top, on a particular ladder. Stop laughing. It's a question. I have to address the question. No smiling also. Be serious. All right, you got it? Okay? No, it's not a question of history. It happens. It happens. All right. If sometimes we ask stupid questions. I remember for the first time when I saw a sea, I was at Mumbai, this marine lines and those 3-block stones, right? So I was sitting there and I asked, my teacher had taken us on a field visit of Koliwada fishing community. So we were there and it was around 2 a.m. in the night. So पहली बार इतनी रात में बाहर आप बैठे हुए बिना डर के, समुंदर है सामने. So I asked him that, sir, there is Arab world, na? I mean, it's Arabian Sea, right? She said, yeah, it's Arabian Sea. I said, sir, after this we have Arab world, na? Bole, हाँ, bilkul. I said, sir, दिख क्यों नहीं रहा? I'm telling you, I was in BA second year. Like, I have read that the earth is spherical and etc. etc. I asked him, sir, dikh kyun nahi raha? I was like actually doing this, standing up and trying to, because for the first time I saw just water. मतलब आप कौन कौन समुद्र देखा है फर्स्ट टाइम जब आप उसको देखते हैं ना, लाइक think about it. I was born in a village, coming from a very humble background in the city of Delhi. My father worked here as a person who was cleaning the dishes actually. और suddenly आप देखते हैं समुंदर बड़ा सा, और आपको कोई जमीन नहीं दिख रही है, and you know that there is a Arab world. And I was like, यार इतना दूर है क्या कि मतलब दिख क्यों नहीं रहा? अब वो सवाल आपने पूछ दिया. And then my sir was like this. He looked at me. For few seconds he kept staring at me. And one of my friend understood the problem. Even he was also nodding the head. Sir, दिख क्यों नहीं रहा? बोले अरे मूर्ख, पृथ्वी गोल है. ठीक है? So it happens. Sometimes we get this questions कि इसके नीचे मैंने इसलिए रेफरी भी लिखा था. अच्छा. All right. It happens. अगर मैं खालसा कॉलेज में पढ़ा रहा होता और ये बात वहां आती ना, तो मुझे पता है क्लास के लड़के क्या बोलते, और इनको इक्वालिटी चाहिए. They will pass a gendered comment. See, suddenly, I mean, even they ask very stupid questions, but I remember that suddenly the so-called male ego and female assertion, they start conflicting with each other. All right. So on this healthy note, let's begin the third one, next theory of state, which is the feminist theory of the state. I am thinking, do I even need to teach this, the feminist theory of state? So let's begin with your GK. What is feminism? Tell me, answer the question. What is feminism? Let me see how much are you aware about it. Batao bhai. Anshu, what is feminism? Only the male of the class, not the female. Yeah. Giving equality to whom? Women. Acha. What is feminism? Women-centric approach. What is feminism? Huh? Again, let's start. What is feminism? I have not got any substantial answer. What is feminism? Okay, let me ask all of you. Vandana, what is feminism? Okay, so I have to ask a question now. So you are saying feminism is a movement, right? Okay. Is it a movement or is it an ideology? Let's try to have something on feminism. Then we can enter the feminist state. Is it a movement or is it an ideology? Choose one. Try to choose one. Then you can have your correlations. Is there any ideological framework in feminism? Is there ideological framework? Has that ideological framework actually led to the development of the movement? Or is it like going like this? Movement then ideology? Okay, so the movement emerged all by itself. There was no ideology. How the movement started if there was no ideology? Or is it like a two-way round, chicken egg problem? Which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? So we can say that there is a persistent movement and there is a persistent ideological reorientation. That is why feminism has expanded the horizon. It initially started with this concern. See, what is this feminism all about? At its very basic minimum understanding, feminism as an ideological movement has two things to offer. Number one, they say that the entire system or multiple spheres of human existence, right? Whether it is politics, whether it is economics, whether it is religion, whether it is culture, it is dominated by male. It is demonstrated by the man, right? So number one thing in feminism is that they have a reflection on the idea of domination, right? And this domination, they actually go with the idea of domination by man or so-called values or ideas of man, and from there they derive the idea of what is considered as patriarchy. So on the one hand, as a movement, they are reflecting what kind of society we have, right? And what is the second major thing of feminism? If this is the first major thing, can you all agree to this? A working definition. If this is the first major thing of feminism, what will be the second major contribution of feminism? Or what's their second idea? Pehla ho gaya reflecting on the world. What kind of human existence we have? It is dominated by patriarchy, structured by patriarchy, governed by patriarchy, made by patriarchy. A system of male dominance. Can we argue like this? Or there is some disagreement in your mind? Okay? So what's the second major argument of feminism? If this is the reflection on society, what they have to offer? You all say na that you are a feminist. कौन बोलता है कि मैं feminist नहीं हूँ? Okay, for the sake of argument, मान लो मैं ही हाथ खड़ा कर दूं, तुम नहीं हो. अच्छा, you are not a feminist? You are? Are you not? You don't know. Are you a feminist? No. अच्छा, you are a feminist? So you don't know. So, are you anti-feminist? No. Are you pro-men? I mean, you can be pro-men. There is nothing wrong in being a pro-men. Of course, we need a men's right activist as well. तभी तो women right activists को और अच्छा लगेगा देखने में, लड़ाई वड़ाई होगा. Toxic masculinity. No, not toxic. What about the idea of responsible masculinity? There is a concept of responsible masculinity. I try to debate with them as well, that what are they actually proposing. There is the idea of responsible masculinity as well. But let's imagine why this, because you know what happens. The term feminism has actually developed into an abuse also. Like if you go out and you start saying anything for the rights of women, suddenly they will start calling you feminazi. ठीक है, तुरंत क्या आ जाएगा फेमिनिज्म की जगह feminazi. Sometimes you will find the terms like feminarchist. Like there are anarchists, there is a feminarchist. So it's a matter of intense debate. But nobody can deny the fact that there is a prevalence and dominance of patriarchy. And this patriarchy operates in relation with other spheres of human existence. Now this is the first contribution of feminism. The second idea is more of a revolutionary idea. They say that this particular mode of existence must be stopped, all right, removed, or in other words, it must be thrown away. So feminism is also about creation of a new world order, creation of a new social order. And with these two particular commitments, they started exploring one of the central concepts of political science, which is the concept of state. And when we think about state now, the idea of feminism has many things to offer. So for example, if I write some names, like I don't know whether you have heard this name or not, Christine D. Pisan. How many of you have heard this name? I think in my opinion, she was one of the first person to actually move forward with the feminist ideological framework. Okay? She was actually writing, I think she was single mother as well, or maybe a widow, and then she started working. Yeah, Christine D. Pisan. Then perhaps you must have heard this name, Mary Wollstonecraft. है ना, ये नाम आप लोगों ने पक्का सुना होगा. Okay, have you read anything by Kate Millett? है ना, इनके बारे में शायद आपने जाना हो. Katrina McKinnon, I have made all of you right. Catherine McKinnon as well, है ना, एक ये भी स्कॉलर हैं. Simone de Beauvoir, हाँ, इनके बारे में जरूर जाना होगा. Carol Pateman, ये वाला इनके बारे में जाना है. Carol Pateman, हाँ, नाम सुना है? अच्छा, you must have heard this name, Judith Butler, Gender Trouble, right? So अगर आप देखोगे ना तो इनके राइटिंग्स में आपको feminist theory of state या feminism पे inputs मिलता है. But what we have not been able to find ना, which is a proper theory of the feminist state. But I would say Carol Pateman, Kate Millett as well, Catherine McKinnon, To some extent you can say, बताओ मुझसे पूछो क्या? Yeah, Susan Waller-Auken is more about justice, है ना, उन्होंने उसमें मिलता है. और भी ऐसे ब्राउमन करके हैं, बेल हुक्स हैं, राइट? बेल हुक्स राइट्स फ्रॉम द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ African American and feminism. So she writes like that. Toni Morrison, another literature figure, they have written many things about it. So there are multiple names that we can refer. But what is the major idea that you have developed as far as the feminist theory of state is concerned? There are two prime variants. One is, which is the liberal variant of the feminist theory of state. The liberal variant, as such, you can understand, they are going to follow the liberal lineage, है ना? ये लोग क्या क्या बताएंगे? Number one, they accept that state is to some extent neutral, right? They have accepted this fact. They further say that state is here to secure the rights of the individual. That's the second point. But they further accept that perhaps the state has not worked properly to uplift women, and this requires a gradual working by the state, which means that as far as the liberal theory of state is concerned, with the feminist variant, there is patriarchy, there is a problem of inequality, but the state is there to actually protect women, and state can actually bring equality for the women, right? So liberal feminist, है ना, they have this different version. So they are like, okay, think about history. Today we have right to vote, है ना? Think about now, today we have right to work, right? We are also having access to multiple spaces. And why this is present to us? Because we have a state which is going to work for us. Like for example, they will be very happy with the passing of the prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. Like, why this is happening? Because the state is there to protect us. So initially they say yes, state has not worked a lot for upliftment of women, but state being neutral and securing the rights of individual is going to work for the women, and this work is going to have a very gradual pace. But in the end, state is not against women. State is just lacking to consider women as equal individuals in comparison to men. As I can sense from all of you कि तुम लोगों को ये theory बहुत ज़्यादा पसंद, इनका variant नहीं आ रहा होगा कि ये क्या बकवास किए जा रहे हैं. But for your understanding, I would say इसी पे सबसे ज़्यादा focus करना, because UPSC के पेपर में in the end we are going with the idea of a liberal state. But then there are some other versions. The other version is majorly what is considered as the radical feminist theory of state. And the radical feminist theory of state has a lot in common with the Marxist theory of state, right? There is just a few, last hour, in 11 o'clock, I was discussing with all of you Miliband and Poulantzas debate, right? What is the fundamental difference between Miliband and Poulantzas? Instrumentalist and structuralist. Same is with the radical variant. There is an instrumentalist view of the state, and there is a structural view of the state. And for them, both the state is actually a patriarchal state, right? This is how they begin the debate. Now, I want all of you to go to class number 3 of PSIR, when I started teaching what is the meaning of politics. And in one of the classes, I discussed politics as power. You remember that class? Today we are going to repeat that argument, क्योंकि उसी टाइम पढ़ाया था, आज काम करेगा. When I taught all of you politics as power, what was the feminist idea on this? There are two variants to politics as power. One is the Marxist thought of politics as power. The second is the feminist thought of politics as power. What the feminists have to offer here? What kind of argument they have provided to us? Politics as power. Any guess? याद करो, पढ़ाया है मैंने, बताओ. Look into your notes. Go back. Look into your notes. Politics as power section पे जाओ. मिला? So what is the idea of politics as power by feminist? नहीं मिला? क्लास के फेमिनिस्ट लोग चुप हो गए हैं, सब के सब फेमिनिस्ट हो, लेकिन हाँ, व्हाट इज इट, टेल मी.
Both feminists and Marxists consider that acquiring power is the way to ameliorate or emancipate this condition.
Good, yes. And so a very negative version of the power and politics, yeah. So what kind of revolution they refer to? Sexual revolution, right? If Marxists refer to a proletariat revolution, they refer to a sexual revolution. Now see how you have to make sense of it. The entire liberal feminist argument is looking at incremental reforms, right? The incremental reforms are going to uplift the condition of women and make them equal partners in the society. This is how liberals are thinking about it. And you can say that perhaps this has happened as well. I mean, we cannot deny right to vote. Political, I mean, Indian state, we are perhaps one of the few states that started with the idea of political equality between men and women. Right? If you go back and let's read article number 39 of the Indian Constitution, equal pay for equal work between men and women, right? Maternity relief for women. So Indian Constitution has it. So what the liberals have to offer in the feminist structure, it's not entirely wrong. And why it becomes like a cause of guffaw, laughter, because at this moment the entire discourse has become very glamorous. And that is why the instrumental view within the radical feminist theory and the structural view within the radical feminist theory, this is gaining more momentum. But in my opinion, the liberals are to the point. Now what these two have to offer, just like what the Marxist theory of state is all about, they both are offering multiple things on patriarchy. When we look at the instrumental theory of state, we find that for the feminist, state is the means or tools through which men maintain their control. Like, I can give you one example. Do you remember the Pinjara Tod movement in Delhi University? There was a movement by the women who were living in hostels. The Pinjara Tod movement. Of course, there are some, I have disagreements with on some points. It happened in Delhi University. So, have you not heard about this thing called curfew hours, curfew timings? That's how the Pinjara Tod movement was all about. That if men can be outside the hostel beyond a particular time, why can't women be? And then they were protesting at arts faculty campus near the statue of Vivekananda and the Central Reference Library. I just understand it. Why do we have a different timings for men and women? They will say for your security. है ना, यही बोलते हैं वो, फॉर योर सिक्योरिटी, तुम्हारी रक्षा के लिए, है ना, ऐसे बोलते हैं वो, तुम्हारी इज्जत के लिए, है ना, इन अदर वर्ड्स. दिस इज द वे द स्टेट इज आल्सो प्रोटेक्टिंग इन अ वे, है ना, कि यू हैव अ डिफरेंट टाइमिंग फॉर मेन एंड विमेन. नाउ वन ऑफ द फंडामेंटल आइडियाज हियर इज दैट लेट्स ट्राई टू ब्रिंग इन द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, है ना, वहां से लेके आते हैं. अकॉर्डिंग टू लिबरल्स, सोशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट हैपन बिटवीन individuals, है ना, ये सारे लोग एक साथ आते हैं, social contract करते हैं. You know what the feminists to offer? That it was not a social contract. It was actually a sexual contract. There was a paternal contract. There was a fraternal contract. It was a sexual contract. And what kind of sexual contract? All these men, as individuals, they came together and they led to the development of a state apparatus which is going to keep us subjugated. And it's not just limited to this. They further argue that if you look at the way this entire structure has worked, it is rooted in multiple spheres of our existence, like the way state behaves whenever there is a religious question, the way state behaves whenever there is a marriage related question. I mean, think about Indian state, and from their perspective, the entire debate of Sabrimala entry, the kind of debate that we had in the society. Think further, this entire idea of having a uniform civil code, for assuring the rights of women. Even today, under the Special Marriage Act, even at this moment, the amendment has not been done properly. There is a clause that if any of the family says, no, we are not in favor of this, then definitely the marriage cannot take place. Are the family going to be happy with intercaste marriage? Why the state is thinking like a patriarch? Why the state is behaving like that? Think further. At this moment, adultery is no more a criminal activity. But it took more than 50 years of independence for the Supreme Court to actually declare this law as illegal. Through judgments, the parliament has not done it. Which means what? That for the radical feminist instrumental view, they say that this entire state apparatus is nothing but an instrument or a tool through which men maintain their control over women, right? And this is the first version. The second version is that instead of looking at it as control, try to understand the structural factor, which is that this kind of state is a result of patriarchal mode of life. Even if you develop any other state, even if you develop a liberal state apparatus, a radical state apparatus, till the time there is patriarchal mode prevailing, the state is going to work in this manner. And not only this, a state itself behaves in a patriarchal sense. A state develops certain capacities through which it keeps women in a position of dependence. Like, can you even give one example of why the structural radical feminists are arguing in this manner? Like, in what manner the state has made women dependent on itself, if not on the so-called men of the family? Dependent on itself. Like, I will give you some examples. How do you look at, how do you look at a welfare state? Is there any connection between welfare state and rising dependence of women on the state? So for example, have you heard about that the DTC bus is free for women? Majority of men in the family are now not even giving women enough money to travel. They're like, free to hai, jao kamane, tere ko kamana, mujhe thodi kamana hai. Move further, you find something more. UPSC in its annual report says that we expect more and more women to take up the examination. We want women to become part of the administration. Now, it might appear that we are looking for a transformative change, but you know what the structural feminists will say? They will say, no, you are trying to make women part of the system to further establish the patriarchal hold over society. Have you heard about these welfare provisions, like providing maternity relief, providing this yojana to women, providing this money to women, right? Ki tum baith ke padho, hai na? So for example, recently there is a new innovative method developed that if a woman is married, if she's pursuing, let's say, higher education, PhD, if she's married, suppose she gets, she's about to deliver a baby or she gets pregnant, that women will have more time as far as the deregistration process is concerned in comparison to a man. Now, this is a very good provision, na? If you get pregnant, you have to deliver a baby, you have to take care of the baby, right? It's a very important thing, isn't it? But imagine that this is also going to lead to more and more women being compelled to deliver a baby while they are studying. Can't it happen in this way also? किस-किस के ऊपर से गया ये? इधर से गया कि ऊपर से गया? गया इधर से. Just think about it, that we have a provision that if a woman gets married, she can deregister. भाई घर संभालना होता है उसको. घर की क्या है? अर्धांगिनी, गृहिणी, है ना? If a woman, by the time after marriage she gets pregnant, she gets more time, but she can come back and pursue her studies. It sounds so much good, na, for women. But is it not going to create, or is it not actually establishing the patriarchal hold over women? That you are supposed to be the creator of the baby, you are supposed to be taking care of household, and you have to manage the home and the world. So in the end, the structural feminists say that state by the welfare provisions actually makes women more dependable on it. Now women are further dependable on the state. Think furthermore, if women are studying, more money for them, right? So we are creating a very big labor force. Or labor aaye, or zara labor of women istemal kar sakein. Think about the idea of you have this so-called advertisement, in which we are showing that what kind of women is the ideal woman. A woman who is very well outside as well as a woman who can take the household very sincerely. So when the state has taken over the welfare provisions, number one, there is no more cause for the women to actually go out and develop a life. आपको क्या मिलता है? Patriarch क्या बोलेगा? State is already giving you money, study. So you are further stopping her from the outside world, from the competitive world. Second, at the same time, you are making the woman now dependent on the state. So if she is getting or she is breaking the shackle of the man in the house, now she has to enter the shackle of the state. And this is a result of the structural nature of patriarchy. If women can't be free at home, she can't be free outside. If a woman demanding freedom at home, keep her dependable outside. This is how the feminist theory has actually developed the understanding of the state, which is entirely not wrong. There is substance to it. And then you can add further variant to it, that how patriarchy, while mixing with capitalism, keeps women as the reserve army. So you are able to perform better because there is some woman out there at the household working for you, churning for you, waking up all the time. And then she has to perform on her business as well. She has to go work in the studies as well. Like, have you watched this movie Dil Dhadkne Do? किस किसने देखा है इस मूवी को? दिल धड़कने दो. अनिल कपूर, प्रियंका चोपड़ा, I think there is, what's the name of the guy? वो, हाँ, Ranveer Singh, yeah, there is Farhan Akhtar as well. है ना? So what is the character of Priyanka Chopra in that movie? I mean, who has not watched the movie? नहीं देखा है? Watch it. You will understand the challenges before a woman who is considered as entrepreneur. So Priyanka Chopra has actually established a business all by herself. She is in a very unhappy marriage. The saas is like a typical saas, by the way. And then she's in an unhappy marriage. The father is a very shrewd personality, but she has no recognition of her work. Everybody is persistently saying, get a baby. Okay? Or how can you talk this much loud, right? So there is Dil Dhadkne Do movie, will understand what the structural feminists are saying. This is in a nutshell the feminist theory of state. Now what feminism is going to propose? If you cannot change the state, remove the state, bring a new mode of governance, right? So instead of having a patriarchal state, what kind of state we must create? A feminist state? No. Why? Why can't there be a feminist state? क्या same चीज आएगी? Feminism is not anti-men. I will give you some options. Shall we create a feminist state? Is it a possibility to create a feminist state? No. Okay. What if we go through a sexual revolution instead of contract? We go through a sexual revolution in society. Ain't sexual revolution going to create a feminist state? I mean, you go and just try to observe this question. Or shall we follow the liberal approach of gradual transformation? Which one is a better one? A revolution to feminist state or gradual transformation to a more equal society?